The Jarl's chair refilled his goblet with mead as often as it was empty. Usually a large party sat down to supper, for an expedition to France was talked of in the spring, and the Jarls and warriors often met to discuss the place of starting, the arrangements for the voyage, and the numbers which each leader would place in the field. The feasts, of course, were kept up to a late hour, and, as was the invariable custom of the Northmen, the arrangements decided upon overnight were rediscussed at a morning meeting, for they held that while over the wine cup each man would speak the truth frankly and honestly, the colder counsels and greater prudence which the morning brought were needed before any matter could be finally settled. A month thus passed, and Beorn, his family, and followers then moved south, as there was to be a great conference near the southern point of the country, at which a large number of the chiefs from Denmark were to be present. Edmund observed that, for some reason, Sweyn was looking forward anxiously to this meeting, and his sisters more than once joked him about his anxiety. "Pooh, pooh," the Jarl said one day in answer to such an observation. "Sweyn is but a lad yet. I know not what you are driving at, and that Sweyn is smitten with the charms of my old companion's daughter, the pretty Freda. I noted it when we were in camp together, but it will be fully another 10 years yet before Sweyn can think of marrying. He's got to win for himself the name of a great warrior before a jarl's daughter of proper spirit would so much as think of him. When he has the spoils of France to lay at her feet, it will be time enough." Sweyn made no reply, but Edmund saw that he was far from pleased at his father's words, and a look of surly determination on his face showed the young Saxon that he would go his own way in the matter if it lay in his power. After 10 days' travelling the party arrived at the rendezvous. Here, drawn up on the shore, were a vast number of galleys of all sizes, for the greater part of those who had assembled had journeyed by sea. Great numbers of huts of boughs and many tents constructed of sails had been erected. Edmund and the other slaves, these being either Saxons or Franks captured in war, soon erected bowers for the jarl and his family. Edmund had been looking forward to the meeting with much anxiety, for he had judged that some mode of escape might there open to him. Among the Saxon slaves were several young men of strength and vigour, and Edmund had confided to them his project of stealing a boat and sailing away in it, and they, knowing that he had experience in navigation, had readily consented to join him in making an effort for freedom. The jarl and his family were warmly welcomed by many of their companions in arms, and the day after their arrival Beorn told Edmund to accompany him to a banquet, at which he and his family were to be present. At 4 in the afternoon they set out, and presently arrived at a large tent. Edmund waited without until the attendants carried in the dishes, when he entered with them and prepared to take his place behind his master's seat. From a few words which had passed between Sweyn and his sisters, Edmund doubted not that the companion with whom Beorn was going to dine was the father of the maiden about whom they had joked him. He was not surprised when, on entering, he saw Sweyn talking earnestly with a damsel somewhat apart from the rest. The entrance of the viands was the signal for all to take their places at the table. They were in all 16 in number, and as nearly half were women, the meeting was evidently of a family character, as upon occasions of importance or when serious discussions were to take place, men alone sat down. As Edmund advanced to take his place, his eye fell upon the jarl, who seated himself at the head of the table, and as he did so he gave a slight start of surprise, for he at once recognized in him the Northman Siegbert, whose ship he had stopped at the mouth of the Humber. From him his eye glanced to the girl by whose side Sweyn was on the point of seating himself, and recognized in her the maiden who had besought her father's life. The dinner commenced and proceeded for some little time, when Edmund saw the girl looking fixedly at him. "Who is that who is standing behind your father's chair?" she asked Sweyn. "A Saxon slave," he answered. "His vessel was well nigh wrecked on our coast. Our people captured him and slew some of his followers, and the ship speedily took to flight." "Father," the girl said in a clear voice which at once attracted the attention of all, "unless my eyes deceive me, the young Saxon standing behind Jarl Beorn is he whose ship captured us as we left England, and who suffered no harm to be done to us." The Northman turned in his chair. "It is he, Freda, sure enough, though how he comes to be a slave here to my comrade Beorn I know not. Beorn, my friend, I owe this youth a great debt of gratitude. He had my life and the life and honour of Freda in his hands, and he spared both, and slave though he may be of yours at present, yet I hail him as my friend. Tell me, how came he in your hands? He is Edmund, the valiant young Saxon who smote us more than once so heavily down in Wessex." "I know it," Beorn replied, "and will tell you how he came into my hands, and in truth he was captured by accident, and not by any valour of my arm." The jarl then related the circumstances under which Edmund had been captured, and the narrow escape he had had of being offered as a sacrifice to Odin; and Siegbert then told his guests at length the incidents of his capture by the dragon. "He let me go, and without a ransom," he concluded, "and that part of my obligation I should be glad to repay, though for his gentleness to Freda I must still remain his debtor. What say you, Beorn? Will you sell him to me? Name your price in horses, arms, and armour, and whatever it be I will pay it to you." "In truth, Siegbert," Beorn said, "I like not to part with the lad, but since you are so urgent, and seeing that you cannot otherwise discharge the obligation under which, as you say, he has laid you, I cannot refuse your prayer. As to the price, we will arrange that anon." "Then it is settled," Siegbert said. "You are a free man, Ealdorman Edmund," and he held out his hand to the youth. "Now seat yourself at the table with my guests. There are none here who may feel honoured at dining with one of King Alfred's bravest thanes." The transformation in Edmund's position was sudden indeed. A moment since he was a slave, and although he had determined upon making an effort for freedom, he had known that the chances of escape were small, as swift galleys would have been sent off in pursuit, and it was probable that he would have been speedily overtaken and brought back. Now he was free, and would doubtless be allowed to return home with the first party who sailed thither. Siegbert at once tried to make Edmund feel at home, addressing much of his conversation to him. Beorn too spoke in a friendly manner with him, but Sweyn was silent and sullen. He was clearly ill pleased at this change of fortune which had turned his father's slave into a fellow guest and equal. His annoyance was greatly heightened by the fact that it was Freda who had recognized the young Saxon, and the pleasure which her face evinced when her father proposed to purchase him from Beorn angered him even more. In his heart he cursed the horse whose welcome neigh had in the first instance saved Edmund's life, and the trial by augury which had confirmed the first omen. After the banquet was over, Siegbert requested Edmund to relate his various adventures. The telling of tales daring was one of the favourite amusements of the Danes. Siegbert and his friends quaffed great bumpers of mead, and the ladies sat apart listening while Edmund told his story. "You have a brave record indeed," Siegbert said when he had finished. "For one so young and fond as are our youths of adventure, there is not one of them of your age who has accomplished a tithe of what you have done. Why, Freda, if this youth were but one of us, he would have the hearts of all the Norse maidens at his feet. In the eyes of a Danish girl, as of a Dane, valour is the highest of recommendations." "Oh, I don't know, father," Freda said, colouring at being thus addressed, "that we should be as bold as that, although assuredly it is but right that a maiden should esteem valour highly. It is to her husband she has to look for protection, and she shares in the honour and spoil which he gains by his valiant deeds, so you have always taught me." "And rightly too, girl. Next to being a great hero, the greatest honour is to be the wife of one. I pledge you, Ealdorman Edmund, and should be right proud were you a son of mine. You have told your story modestly, for many of the battles and adventures of which you have spoken are known to me by report, and fame has given you a larger share in the successes than you claim for yourself. 'Tis a pity you were not born a Northman, for there is little for you to do in Saxon England now." "I do not despair yet," Edmund replied. "Things have gone badly with us, but the last blow is not struck yet. You will hear of King Alfred in the spring, unless I am mistaken." "But they say your King Alfred is half a monk, and that he loves reading books more than handling the sword, though to do him justice he has shown himself a brave warrior, and has given us far more trouble than all the other Saxon kings together." "King Alfred fights bravely," Edmund said, "because he is fighting for his country and people. But it is true that he loves not war nor strife. He reads much and thinks more, and should he ever come to his kingdom again he will assuredly be one of the wisest and best monarchs who has ever sat on a throne. He has talked to me much of the things which he has at heart, and I know he intends to draw up wise laws for the ruling of his people." "We love not greatly being ruled, we Northmen," Beorn said, "but for each to go his own way as he wills, provided only he inflicts no ill will upon his neighbour. We come and we go each as it pleases him. Our